Many of us who have experienced trauma or are in community with or in partnership or relationship with individuals who have a shared experience of trauma can often slip into this cult of knowledge. Right? I know how bad it was, you don't. And I will levy that many of my military and combat brothers and sisters struggle with this coming home, right? Because there is such a divide. I just watched my best friend die 2 weeks ago, and now I have to stand in line while this lady digs through her change purse for exact change? And she's upset about it? Oh, but you got a yellow ribbon bumper sticker on the back of your car. That's the cult of knowing, right? That's the pitfall, the danger, the trap of saying that my pain is worse. And in particular, for us as a Christian, as a faith community, I think that that is a dangerous trap. Right? Because the pain of a community that has been subjugated due to the color of their skin for years is unique, right? As is pain of the knowledge of watching your alcoholic father stumble and trip when you're 13 years old and wonder if he's going to knock on your door. Huh? That's where we're at here. That's what I'm talking about. That's the place that I'm wanting to go to. And that's what having a trauma-informed relationship with yourself and your community is about. It's about this knowledge that we don't have a monopoly. We do have to own whatever our experiences of trauma are. I make a carte blanche statement that many of my colleagues will argue against, that I think we've all experienced trauma, regardless of your wealth or socioeconomic space. And it's all valid. Right? It all counts and it all matters. How we interact with that, how we interact with it in our own hearts and in ourselves and with others, that's what we're talking about. So can I get some north and south? I don't have an agreement here that we all signed, but that's where we're at. And I understand if you're not ready or you need to step out at any time or you want to scream at me, that's important too, right? So that's where we're at. So we'll start this by me making a very bold statement here, and then I want it to set with you. I want you to stew with it for a little while, and then we'll come back and we'll see if I've convinced you. I believe that God has PTSD. Say it again. I believe that God suffers from PTSD. Take that. She wrote it. This isn't, I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for this, and I'm not an artist, but stick with me. I label this A and B, truly and honestly, just to piss statisticians off who want XY accesses. We have experiences in life, and we have time. So we put time here, put experience here. And I want to be very clear about this experience column. This experience column is dictated and is contextual to race, ethnicity, identity, orientation, gender, socioeconomic status. This is a plug-and-play, though. And I believe that in any cultural context, there are certain experiences that we have check marks for. Time goes on, right? If you are born here and you're of the Jewish faith, there's going to be an experience here, right? You're going to get circumcised. Something's going to happen, right? In the Latino and Hispanic, Latinx communities, there's going to be a quinceañera. You're a female, probably, right? We're going to move through this. For most of us who have gone to high school, there's going to be a winter formal or a prom. For those of us who were reared on farms, there's going to come a time where your dad says, get your ass into the cowshed, and you're going to have to scoop. going to come a time where this happens. There's going to come a time when you grow up in poverty on the streets of an inner city, that you have to struggle with the question of how do I do what needs to be done to make sure that my family's fed. Right? If you're born in Iraq in 2000, right? There's going to come a time in your cultural experience where what does it mean to still have an occupied army on your soil, right? And there's going to be rituals, and there's going to be things, there's going to be experience, and then there's going to be time. And we're going to move on this in a particular way, in a way that is generally ordained and pre-established for the most part. There's expectations of these social experiences that line up with time. And then, regardless of this, regardless of your experience, regardless of your race, your culture, your ethnicity, your religion, I argue there's going to be trauma. There's going to be a moment after that winter formal when you said no. But he didn't listen. There's going to be a moment when you have to put your own father in the dirt. There's going to be a moment where you're not sure how you're going to keep the lights on. It's going to be a moment where you screwed up, made a bad decision. Your partner's going to find out. Your boss is going to find out. There's going to be moments of trauma, whatever they are. Again, remember, no one community has a monopoly on trauma. But there's going to be a moment of trauma. Society, broader psychology, theology even, I argue, wants us to continue to move on this line, on this continuum of experience and then time. Wants us to move forward on this. Time keeps going. There's no question about that. But I argue something very unique in post-traumatic stress and trauma writ large is this idea and this notion of flashback, right? Smell. When you've held your dying grandfather's body, right? And they release everything that's in them when they take that last breath. Then 10 years later, you smell urine and you're taken right back into that moment. A perfume. There are sensory things that at large, say, bring us into moments of flashback. Something very unique about trauma, post-traumatic stress, isn't that it was just the moment of trauma. It wasn't just the effect, E-F-F-E-C-T. It was the affect. It's the living in the knowledge that my best friend would be 39 this year with a 13-year-old. It's living in the knowledge of what would my body be if it hadn't been taken advantage of. What would my family look like if I hadn't pushed my son out of the house when he told me he was gay? Whatever it is. It's not just the event of trauma, it's the affect. It's the perpetual knowledge of what could have been. You live with this specter. I argue you cannot flash back to this moment of trauma in ways that we have with, and again, I take heat from this all the time from people that are smarter than me. My PhD is in ethics, it's not in psychology. Psychologists love to drag me across the coals, and rightfully so, on this, but I argue that a flashback isn't a real thing. You can't flash back to this moment, because I argue that you never left this moment. There's a part of you that in that moment of trauma throws you off of this socially accepted scale. There's a piece of you that is left in that moment when you had to bury your mother. Something in you, something in me, is still on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan, where the time came that I first heard bullets shot at me. Something is left there. I'm a Luddite when it comes to technology, so some of you may be with me on that. You know Microsoft Paint? You ever heard of Microsoft Paint? Microsoft Word? Like, I'm still in version 2007. There's this feature where you can draw a line, and then you can click and pull the line. You stretch this line that you've drawn. This is what society, writ large in general, our faith, our communities, and often our relationships, attempt to do to us. Because everything about our faith tells us we're going to get to Easter Sunday. This line is going to continue. But I argue what's happened here is that you have now created a different line in the continuum of existence, in this XY axis. Something's happened to you uniquely in that moment of trauma. And society, and culture, and therapy, and all these other things, faith, dare I say, please don't, not a heretic, I promise, pulls us, stretches us. And we experience all of this, yes, and all of this, but then don't forget that line's still connected back here. Something in us rests in that moment of trauma. So as I said, part of trauma, part of PTSD, part of healthy relationships is not just the effect of the moment of trauma, but the affect, right? Generally speaking, we proclaim certain things in the Christian faith. Broadly speaking, we admit to an all-knowing, omnipotent God. If you've not heard of that, then I thought we were Presbyterian. This construct of the all-knowing God, the omnipotent. What that means then, taking this against what I said earlier, that God knows what every single life that was lost and rests at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean from the transatlantic slave trade would have been had they not got thrown over. God knows what every child who marched unwillingly into the crematoriums of Nazi Germany would have lived into. God knows what my best friend would look like today if he was 39. God knows who you would be had that moment or that event happened. Or not happened, excuse me. God knows who your child would be today that you had to lay to rest. That you lost in the womb. God knows all of that. And therefore, I boldly and with affirmation return to my statement that God has PTSD. My God carries that weight and that suffering and that knowledge. If there is such a thing as an all-knowing God. So now we're forced with, do we hold on to that? I'm not going to give you an answer. But we have to think about it. The suffering of Christ is resurrected with the scars. Heard of doubting Thomas? What did it take? That scar was still there. It didn't just magically go away. You didn't just pull this thread until it straightened itself out. As I said earlier today, Transfiguration Sunday is one of my favorite three, so it's Maundy Thursday. I'm not a masochist, I promise. The third being Holy Saturday. A day we often forget, and a day that is crucial in my doctoral work, in my coursework. If we had time, we'd go through. A guy named Balthazar, who's a Roman Catholic theologian, and a few others, who talks about how important Holy Saturday is because we love to put Jesus on the cross, right? That sounds weird to say, but hear me out here. Good Friday, we know about it. We know what's going on there, right? We love that to get to Easter Sunday, to the resurrection. Got to get there. Something happens in between Friday and Sunday, friends. There's a day. It's called Holy Saturday. And per our, broadly speaking, tradition, we are told, as people of faith, what happens on that day is that Christ's very self descends into hell. And what is not hell but living in the wake of trauma? Living in the knowledge of that suffering. God descends into that moment of hell with us, forever and always. The uplifting part of this is that I hope you hear that you're not alone in that moment of trauma. And the charge in this that I'm giving you is to deal with how you understand whether or not somebody's going to get to Easter Sunday or not. Can you live with being in Holy Saturday with someone, in relationship to them, perhaps with yourself, if you never get to Easter Sunday? This is where people call me heretic, right? Because we got to get to Easter Sunday. It's part of our story. It has to happen. And I know that it does. But part of living and dealing in the wake of life trauma, or the moment or the event, is the knowledge that some of us, whether we want to admit it or not, are in Holy Saturday right now. You can only imagine that there's a handful in Ukraine right now that are in Holy Saturday. You can only imagine that there's a handful probably 20 miles that way, huh? Or go in any direction, that are living and suffering in that space actively right now. What if they never get to Easter Sunday? Again, I have more questions than answers. Because as a chaplain who has responded to more suicides, not attempts, but completions, that I can remember, that I can count, that haunt me to this day, I have to deal with whether or not those guys and gals got to Easter Sunday. Right? Because in their Holy Saturday, they found a way to get out. God has PTSD. Being acutely and intimately aware of our own traumas, grabbing that trauma, shoving this stretched out line back into that moment. As taught as an infantry officer. Grab them by the belt, right? Draw them close. Bring this trauma that you have experienced. And I'm begging people, and the depth of the course, we go through a semester, this is like the fire hose, right? This is all the pain packed in 20 minutes. As we work through that, we come towards trauma-informed ways of talking to your buddies who you know struggle with addiction. Trauma-informed ways of being in relationship with people that you know have a particular history and a particular path. Do I make that joke? Do I bring that up? Do I not bring it up? Maybe I do bring it, right? That's what it means to be a trauma-informed relationship, is having knowledge and the wherewithal to admit that somebody has trauma and being careful about how we address that, yes? But I argue that the transformation, right, the transformative power in all of this that just sounds probably really dark, you know? Is that God's in Holy Saturday, right? It's right there, the answer's right there in front of us. I challenge us to wrestle with being comfortable with not getting to Easter Sunday every day, right? Or perhaps in all of our relationships. Do you have the fortitude and the wherewithal to set with your own Holy Saturday? Is the question. And if you don't, which I know I didn't for quite some time in my own life, as an officer in the Army, we have unique coping mechanisms. Sometimes they come in bias. Someone had to come alongside me and be willing to set in that Holy Saturday. That is a transfigurative and transformative power of love that I think reflects in in what we did today, what we're talking about today with Transfiguration Sunday. That's why I think it's as important as Easter, to acknowledge and to reconcile with that there is a holy second, there is the depth of hell and pain and struggle that God comes and rests and lives in with us. So rushing to fixing the problem may not be the answer. Rushing quickly to give an answer about that's not that bad. Heaven gained another angel. Screw heaven. I'd really like my angel to be with me today. Huh? We have to be careful, is what I'm saying. All these old altruisms, all these soliloquies, these things we say in moments where we're confronted with pain and we're suffering and we're mourning with somebody, have power, and they have the ability to continue to stretch this line, to farce the pain away. Maybe if you wouldn't have worn that dress. Well, boys are just going to be boys. Well, he had one last good day. Remember that? Yeah, well, damn it, I wish you would have had 2 more. Not just one. That's how we have to become aware of our language, our speak. Right? This comes later on in the bigger talk about how we become trauma-informed and how we live in that relationship. It's being mindful of our words and our actions. Now, again, I'm not telling everybody to walk around on pins and needles. Some of the funniest moments I've shared in my life were with my fellow combat veterans when we were staring death in its eyes and we just had to laugh, right? Just had to make an inappropriate joke. In any other context would get you fired. Right? But you wrestled with it in a way. Right? So I'm not saying, again, just like there's no single monopoly on pain, there's no single monopoly on how we deal with it. But the only way we're going to deal with it is if we admit and we acknowledge and we come to terms with the fact of how we in our own lives have been pulled and stretched. That's for you to answer and to review and to look into your own hearts, right? That's why I said I'm not going to have us all stand up and tell our moment of trouble, right? But there's entire therapy modalities that are based in that. Based in sitting around with people in that suffering, acknowledging and reconciling ourselves with the fact that we all have pain. Again, I swear, I'm not a masochist. There is the 15-minute melt your face off. Holy crap, this guy, what is he talking about? Why did he just make me feel horrible? Speech. There's the nuts and the bolts that you just stuck your hand straight into the engine of this idea of trauma-informed reconciliation, of the idea that God has PTSD, of the call for you to reconcile with it, of the call for you to think about how you interact with other people. That's the bluff, bottom line up front. That's the down and dirty. And there's so much more, don't get me wrong. And there's books that I can recommend, other than the Bible. Good book. Courses I can recommend. But through all that liturgy, through all that education, through all that stuff, the best book is your own heart. You've lived whatever experience it is that you carry inside. You've had this moment for you. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But I bet you had one. Maybe you're somewhere here. Maybe you're not. I don't know. But my over-under on the fact that we sit in a room full of people every Sunday is somebody in that room's being stretched. How do we have a call and an obligation to not do this stretching thing? To not pretend? To speak in our liturgy, in our relationships, truthfully in a way that doesn't create more harm. Doesn't stretch them to that limit. That brings this Microsoft Paint doodle down here admits it, acknowledges it, wrestles with the fact that what if you don't leave it? And then starts to move through time. Part of the course also is wrestling with this even notion of time. I think we have a really bad relationship with time. How we think it's so straight. But this, I argue, shows us that it's not. This messes with things. This is messy. Trauma is messy. Our responsibility to respond is messy also. So, you don't have to answer out loud, but I want you to think. You can email Reverend Angela at Angela. Your answer. About whether or not God has PTSD. Because if God does, what does that mean for you in your relationships with yourself, and your children, and your family? And if it doesn't, what does it mean? And how can you take trauma and live in a reconstructed, transfigured relationship of self, community, and others in a way that is healthy in light of our call as Christians to never yield in the face of an opportunity of compassion? Does compassion look like, right? We can keep going down this whole thing. So I just threw a lot of noise, a lot of noise actually. If I pissed you off, I've probably done my job, I guess, right? I don't know. If I made you think, that's what I was here to do. Go ahead.
I'm not mad yet.
Okay, I'm not mad yet. I'll keep going. No. I'm done talking. I don't know what my time hack here is. We're at 12:40. We got some time, and this is the time that I set aside because I want us to now. Please feel free to. Here's the most academic theologian pastor question I can offer you right now. How does this make you feel? On a scale, 1 star, do not recommend. No, I do answer that as a community for anybody who's willing to answer. How does this thought thing that I just gave you make you feel?
Soul searching.
Soul searching. If I had a whiteboard, if I could write better, I'd put that. Soul searching.
I'm trying to understand it, so I'm going to ask my question.
Yeah.
In the context of the statement that God has PTSD, I'm trying to think about it and articulate it. So if the idea is that God knows our trauma, and He's not willing to wipe it away, He's willing to sit with us in Holy Saturday. Is that kind of what you're saying in terms of God's PTSD? Because He can see what our lives would be like if we hadn't experienced the trauma. And He's not willing to ask us to pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
He knows it happened, and so...
And accepts you in that wholeness. Loves you in that wholeness, that it did happen. I met a guy who turned out to just be incredibly wise last night at dinner. And he told me about a spiritual moment that he had in the Sequoia National Forest with some trees. And I really thought it was a good opportunity to market a book to that environmentalist, that group, because they like to read about how important that stuff is. Told me about the majesty. I have not been to Sequoia National Forest. I've never. My father dragged me out there when I was little, and I got a picture next to a big tree, but I didn't. And he said they were towering. They're huge. And they carry the scars of 2,000 years. Chainsaws, fire. Trees that were around, debatably, in the time of harvest. Scarred, mired, with broken bark. And yet are growing to the sky. Their trauma is still there. That moment of pain and experience for that tree did not happen. Planting more trees isn't going to take it away. And does that scar devalue its wholeness? Does covering it up enable it to be a better tree? Does not owning up to what happened, maybe our participation in the moment of trauma? Denying it, wipe it away? I don't hear of a God who just magically poofs these things away. In Holy Saturday, I hear of a God that comes and sits with us in that trauma. I think that's an oft-looked responsibility that we have as people of faith. Sorry if that just made it worse.
No, that helps.
But I would also think that God is not a God that says, well, what if? Boy, what if that happened? That's not of God. God knew in advance what would happen, and He wouldn't. I don't think He tempts us to greater pain. Boy, what if enrollment? What if that? What if you had? That's just to me, that's a constant torment of the enemy. Telling you, oh, if only you had done this. If only you had done that. It's just the same as condemnation. And I don't think God's in what if.
Brings up a very powerful point. I'll paraphrase it and correct me if you didn't hear. Talking about that he doesn't think God deals in what ifs. That's powerful. That's huge. I think that's a part of this, right? But I do believe that God does deal, and I knock down and drag out arguments about this. It's not so much what if, it is it's the could have.
But that's, I mean, He helps us deal with the loss, but He won't tempt us to think about, oh, if only, what if, what it could, what it could have, should have. That's
But trauma does.
I know, but God doesn't. God offers us the healing coming. But I think from my own experience is the what could have happened, what if, is what God helps us get past.
I would agree.
Because God, all things work together for good to those who love God. And the circumstances, and all that God already good. So the circumstances that God brings are for our growth and for His glory. I wouldn't argue that, that He lets bad things happen to make it feel worse.
I think that's a fair statement. It's a true statement. But the bad things do happen. We're left to figure it out in how we're going to live in relationship to it and with God. And to live into our call to walk alongside those who may be facing that temptation, to go down the path of what if. And if you can find a way to do that, that lives genuinely into your own story and your own faith, I think you're on the path of taking this and shoving it back and not faking it. Thank you. Questions? In the back.
I really don't have a question. I just have a comment. I would like to thank you for the speech, of course, that you gave us. It was great. For a person who lived through wars, I have a lot of friends who lived even through a lot more wars than I did. Heard the planes, seen bombs, seen death. It's good that we can actually articulate. Of course, our faith always, that thanks be to God, we have the Easter Sunday.
Amen.
But it's good also to articulate the Holy Saturday. So I'm going to use that.
It's challenging, right?
I never thought of it that way. But it's good to know in this way. God was with us, has been with us, will be with us, will take us through Jordan to the promised land. We definitely believe in that. But it's good to state that in this way, that God has been with us and will be with us through the darkest times. So anyway, I wanted just to say thank you for that.
No, thank you. You're absolutely correct. This isn't me trying to, again, I think I said it in my sermon, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, okay?
So this is a journey and not a destination.
Oh, what if that's the case, huh? I may be fired. I may be out of job.
I got a question. and
Yeah.
It involves your job too.
Sure.
Okay, say my trauma is instant, like a nuclear bomb blows up and I live but I'm burned.
Mhm.
Or I'm kept in a basement like those women in Cleveland for 16 years. Which trauma or Saturday, Holy Saturday of this person's life, the bomb victim, the burn victim, or the abduction in the basement for a 16 years victim, which one has a worse Saturday in your opinion or a harder trauma to get over with? Who's
Yeah, I don't think there is such a thing.
Really?
Yeah. I think that, I think it's one of the neighbors that remind us that our value to God is God's value to the sparrow, something like that. I'm not good at memorizing stuff, right? That our relationship with God in our value is as much as the blade of grass. That blade of grass doesn't mean anything. Then do we? Wait, our relationship is the same. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So that's part of this knowledge to me that I do not believe in all the miracles of Christ that the suffering of a dead Lazarus or his family was more or less than the suffering of the prostitute or the demon child afflicted that we heard about today. So I just don't think we can do that. And I think, though, that we do have the cult of knowing that wants to do that. I think it's normal. I don't think your question's wrong. I want to be careful about what I'm saying because I'm not attacking it. It's not a. Yeah, no. I don't think that it's worth calibrating those two events, and I think that is a pitfall that can happen. That then will lead us to say, "Well, I had it worse than you did." And that, to me, is not of what our faith is calling us to do. It's calling us to admit that your pain is as heavy as mine, and we have a God who says that they will carry it with us, no matter how big or small. Thank you, Mike.
I had a question about responding to the cult of knowledge.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, because if I'm pissed off, I'm just going to be mad, right? How do you deal with that?
So my experience has been sitting with some people who have had some really complex trauma, sexual trauma, and walking with them. And just being with them has been fine. But then staff members have been very abrasive. To me, as a volunteer, someone who's been willing to walk alongside to sit with that cult of knowing. So it's more on a professional basis than a personal basis. But I'm just curious, do you have any ideas, perspective, response of how do you, if you're trying to be in Holy Saturday with someone, deal with somebody else sort of shaming you with that cult of knowledge?
Yeah, so again, with my caveat that I opened this course up with, this is dangerous stuff too. Right, this is it's irresponsible of me to not really have taken the usually 3 days that I take to prep for the stuff that we just talked about in 15 minutes. And this is you could do more pain by just having this conversation. You cannot be irresponsible in these moments. That's very real. But to get to hopefully a short answer, which is usually the wrong one, but the short answer to this complex question. Usually when I go to bed at night, I don't pray to get what I deserve. Because I probably wouldn't want that. I pray for mercy. Mercy, mercy, mercy. And in that prayer of mercy, I think we have an opportunity to live into being a merciful being. That's also dangerous. Because for how long then does mercy not become a doormat? I'm merciful to my husband, but he's still going to not show up to me. I'm merciful to my wife, but she's still going to throw a pan at me. Right? So there's a line here, right? And this is all part of this bigger course too. But the short one is mercy, right? That's my it's always my fallback. That's my rally point. And I think mercy is a rally point in our faith as well. That's when you're 30 seconds out and nobody's coming to save you, I go to mercy. But I can't say that without it would be irresponsible of me to say that without the knowledge, or at least addressing the fact that this is complicated. How you work with these folks is complicated, and acknowledging that, damn it, man, any of our one actions could be the wrong one and make it worse. Yeah. Right, so is it the journey as opposed to the destination? Again, it's not a cop-out. Questions? Yes, ma'am?
I just wonder, I'm thinking about the time piece, your bottom of
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about time in events of a person's life with trauma?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're good at saying, well, time heals and
Mm-hmm.
those things, but could you speak more to that?
I think that saying does this.
And we talked about the trees too,
Right.
so.
Trees keep growing. I don't want to expose all of my academic hits here, but I think that at large, we have a very particular way in the West. Now we're getting into the waters. Now he's a hippie Western. Yeah. I challenge the construct of time as it has been presented to us. I challenge that time is actually linear, because I argue that it's not. We're seeing it. But we don't really have a very good vernacular or vocabulary, and even our faith has been molded over thousands of years in a Western Stoic tradition that messes with this ability to view time as maybe not so linear. Then we have the physiological realities that time's not linear. Oh, I was born 38 years ago. There's time, right? But then you throw experience on top of that. You throw trauma, you throw these things. So, admittedly, I do pull from some Eastern philosophy and thought about where time is at and how journeys and destinations come into it. And I think that we have to wrestle with the knowledge of time. And whether or not, gosh, you guys are going to drive me out of here with pitchforks. Whether or not time is real.
Well, it's man-made, isn't it?
I argue.
They're commonly understood to be man-made. This is counting.
Mm-hmm. And counting matters. Right? Math is in elementary, we need it. But those 13 years that I got with my brother before he was ripped from my hands in a car accident, are those 13 years just gone? Where did they go? Is it real? Is it done? The question about time is one that I do get into later, but it's one that I do challenge us, that we have to think about our relationship with time.
Can you come back next week?
Sarah, we'll renegotiate a contract. I'm a union chaplain. I got to prevent it. One last question. Let's check my time. I do. We're at 12:54, so we're right on time for any last parting shots. You want to stump the chump? You want to?
So on the news, people are saying that, or I've heard, maybe you've heard it too, that this COVID epidemic has created some kind of individual, group, national, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Do you think, is that valid? Is that just news speaking?
I like that. I think that there is a distinct possibility that collective trauma in the wake of an epidemic has the ability to shape and reform how we as a culture and a society move forward. I think we have to look at how after the 1917 Spanish flu epidemic, we rethought how we did certain things. Regardless of your feelings about COVID, that's not what I'm talking about. Regardless of whether or not you believe or don't believe it, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that we're even saying the word, right? I think that also there has to be in the conscious memory of, what, 800,000 people dead? My wife's an infectious disease physician, so I'm throwing her under the bus right now on statistics. How many people have, okay, she doesn't, maybe she's not a good.
She's off.
She's off today. She's off today. So, but just by virtue of there being these deaths alone, how does the culture not deal with 800,000 individual deaths, as dispersed or disconnected as they may be? So I do think it will shape and is shaping in how we culturally move forward, right, wrong, good, bad, indifferent. It is and has shaped how we look at each other when we're wearing a mask or not, what we think about whether or not we should or shouldn't. So I do think that there can be a collective social stress, post-traumatic stress, post-event of trauma, the rupture of COVID on the scene, the question about where it came from, how it's going to impact us. In 2020, right, we've lost 2 years. Poof. Surrounded by and life didn't stop, right? But I look back on it feels like 2020, but it's not. It's 2022. And I was in Tampa, Special Operations Command, when this thing popped off. And I took leave, and I got a flight home, and I got to my vehicle in Southern Illinois, and I loaded up some food, and I grabbed a rifle, and I drove to Chicago, where my wife was an infectious disease doctor downtown, because she sent me a text as windows were being boarded up on Michigan Avenue. Nobody had a clue, right, what this was going to do. Take away electricity for 48 hours, people seem to change their feelings, right? And I'm not saying the electricity went out. I'm saying we had no idea what was coming. And we have, and we've dealt with it, and we've learned, and we've processed, and we have these ways. But in that moment, was there not a moment of trauma? Trauma enough to get me on a plane and get me home, and me thinking, how am I going to feed my future life, right? I have to live with that. The kids who didn't get to go to school for the last 2 years have a collective social identity. Imagine being a freshman, and now you're a senior, and you have those 2 years of digital online learning, right? And having a community of teachers who busted their asses, who did everything they could to provide this education, right? But still you have this lack of particular social, I'm in the weeds on this, and that's not what I meant to do. My answer is yes, I think that there's the possibility of a broader social trauma in the wake of COVID. I think there is. And I think that how we respond to that, how we respond to people who have been affected by COVID or who believe in it or don't believe in it, is part of this as well. Yeah, right? So, it's important. I thank you. I think I'm getting the hook.
Can you all imagine? Can you all imagine? He's from the land of Lincoln. Did you get a guess at the rhetoric there? And his speaking, great speakers come from Illinois. So let's give him another round of applause. I'm going to close us in prayer. I want you to stay up here. We're thankful that you spent this time with us. I'm hoping that this was enriching to your faith. I'm hoping it was challenging to your faith as well as we sit with it and we see what the Spirit is saying to us. Again, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can email Reverend Angela. You're always welcome to talk to Pastor Chase. We can make his information available. And of course, your pastors are available as well for more conversation. This is heavy stuff, but it's true. It's true stuff. And if we're not dealing with truth, then what are we doing here? So we're thankful for that. I have an announcement about next Sunday. Next Sunday, my wife is going to do a class on the Stations of the Cross. She is, well, look at that. Perfect timing. And she's doing Stations of the Cross, and she's going to speak about art and spirituality. Art and spirituality. So that is her passion. She loves art, and she meets with artists, and she spends a lot of time with that. And she's in fact, I don't know if should I share you? She's writing a book on it. So she's really excited. She'll probably be done by December of this year. So no pressure. But ask her in December, she's done. But yeah, so that's next Sunday at 11:45. There'll also be lunch. Pastor Chase and his wife Lindsay, do you want to come on up? Dr. Lindsay? You want to come up a second? They're about to hit the road, and Dr. Lindsay is with child, as we like to say in the King James. And they're about to get on a 7-hour road trip back home, so we're thankful that they made their way here and spent some time with us. So we're going to extend our hands out and bless them on their way from here. So let's all pray. God, we are so thankful on this day for the gift of Reverend Dr. Chase and his wife, Dr. Lindsay. We're thankful for their life. We're thankful for the life that they are going to welcome soon. We're thankful for the ministry of healing broken hearts and broken bodies. We're thankful for what we heard today. We know it was deep, it's heavy. We ask that your Spirit would show us how to be present with people on Holy Saturday in the depths of pain and hell, that we could explore our own traumas and also look at compassion at the traumas of others, and that we would see your presence there. Though we make our bed in hell, your presence is there. Wherever we are to go, we cannot flee from your presence. And so we pray your blessing on them as they travel this day, traveling mercies. Bless their coming in and their going out this day and evermore. And bless us as we go to our next places. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you.